Hi, I'm Joel, a white kid that grew up in Indonesia. I'm interested in the unvarnished look, an examination of the driving force for art. In this series, I'm going to explore the relationship between places, the place you leave, the place you go, and the place that develops in between. That third space can be a strange and wonderful fusion, a hybrid for creative magic. These conversations will hopefully develop a composite picture of a third culture artist who has straddled multiple worlds and how that influences their expression through art. All right.
All right.
All good? Sweet? Everything's ready? Cool. Well, it's Ashwini?
Ashwini.
Ashwini.
Yeah.
Did I say it right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Ashwini, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Ashwini is a contemporary dance artist and choreographer whose primary focus is a classical Indian dance form that originated in Tamil Nadu called Bharatanatyam. It's an ancient art form that originated hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Born in Singapore, raised in Vancouver, trained in India, is what her website tells me. I like it when things are presented in threes. Third heat. Show title plug. There's a heavy Indian influence in Singapore, as one of its 5 official languages is Tamil. When I was living in Singapore, I watched a lot of Indian movies on cable, and they're really fun. But I don't know much about dance, something that features prominently in their cinema. I'm white, I'm a stiff on the dance floor, and all I can manage when I'm DJing is a side shuffle or a head bob. So, I'm really excited to hear Ashwini's story and get a little more understanding of her art discipline. Hi, I'm Joel. Welcome to the show, Third Heat. We call it Third Heat series, but anyway, I won't get into it, but a lot of the other episodes I was pronouncing it wrong, but then what I have on my social media is something completely different. So, Third Heat series officially. Are you from Singapore?
Yes, I was born there.
You're born in
Yes.
Singapore. Cool.
Yes.
This is great because we actually have some things in common because I have lived in Singapore for a bit, and
Cool.
yeah, we can go down that rabbit hole a little bit later. Anyway, welcome to the show. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Okay, I know you already told me where you're born, but tell me where you're born, and when you moved to Canada, how long you lived in Singapore, et cetera, et cetera. Give me a little tiny little.
Sure. Well, yeah, I was born in Singapore, and I guess perhaps I should say something about my parents too. I
Sure.
feel like that sort of informs who I am. So my parents are second generation Singaporeans, and then their families, so my grandparents are from southern India, specifically in the region of Tamil Nadu. And yeah, I moved to Canada at age 7, grew up here in Vancouver, and it's been over 20 years being here.
Crazy.
But I go back to Singapore quite often.
Cool.
So I feel like there are 2 worlds for me, Singapore, Vancouver, and kind of a third one in India, but that's something I've only recently discovered.
Cool. So, let's talk a little bit about Singapore. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I miss things like the roti canai and roti prata, like the late night eats outdoors at the hawker centers and really cheap, excellent food. Like you can spend no money and have amazing food pretty much anywhere. What do you miss the most about Singapore, being here?
I think that's my favorite question because I'm really interested in, I guess, what markers indicate what home is, because the thing I miss the most about Singapore is actually the air. It sounds so absurd, but when I fly back, I exit the airport, there's heavy air conditioning in the airport, and you go out and the air just smacks you in the face, just as you're gesturing. It's so thick, it's so humid, it's so warm. It feels like you're being hugged. And there's kind of a scent too that I am drawn to, and I go back and I smell the air and I feel the air and I feel like, okay, I'm home.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Singapore is so colorful, amazing food. But of course people so much of my family is there, and I miss all those things, but the most compelling thing is just, I guess, like the atmosphere.
Is it like I identify with that a little bit because was it the olfactory? It's like all the senses that like I attach to memory. For instance, if I go shopping at Metrotown and in the
Yeah.
parking garage, there's a spot in the parking garage that reminds me of Singapore. I just smell it and I'm like, smells like Singapore. Are you an only child or do you have brothers and
No,
sisters?
I've got an older brother,
Yeah.
younger sister.
And where do they
So
live?
they live here.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
your parents live here too?
My parents live here. Yeah, we
Okay,
moved
so you moved
like
as a
all
family.
together in year 2000.
Cool. I have a good memory of Singapore too, like smoking hookah in Little India, like on the sidewalk
like
on the
Arab
covered
Street.
Yeah, Arab Street. Yeah, like on
Yeah.
the covered walkway there. Yeah, my parents
Yeah.
live in Changi Village. I miss like driving on a highway and not really realizing you're driving in the middle of the city because there's so much floral vegetation everywhere. Like you don't know that there's literally skyrocket like beside you, but it's just green. And like
Yeah, their motto is actually green and clean, I think.
yeah.
So yeah, so Singapore is super clean and just super green, and I feel like maybe that's that scent that informs like kind of the scent. Like
For
I just
sure.
love like the smell of the vegetation and like just like the oxygen that it gives. It's so life-bearing and invigorating.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a bit about your growing up in Singapore, what you remember of it.
Oh, it's so absurd for me because I think when I moved here at age 7, I had such a big culture shock that I almost erased all the memories I had in Singapore before moving. And, to this day, I don't know why that is. Of course, I remember just a few things like, hanging out in our apartment. I had a neighbor friend that I was close to. But so many things just got erased. And yeah, that's something that I'm still trying to navigate, like kind of. And I wonder why like I'm so attached to that sense of air too, and that feeling of warmth. Like there's definitely something there that I need to still work out. But yeah, like here, I don't think my parents really explained to me like why we were moving and like I guess what it would feel like. It was just so new to them as well, and so I guess coming here, I felt a little bit lost, and I just sort of like I shed away like this like old life that I had. Even my accent changed. Before I had a typical Singaporean accent, like at age 7, and people in school.
Singlish.
It's English, yeah. And Singlish is very different from English. Like there's just different like
I will wait here for
grammar
you
rules.
later.
Exactly, right? Like there are different prepositions that are missing, and so in school, like people couldn't understand what I was saying, and they couldn't understand why a brown girl would have a Southeast Asian accent. It was hard for them to understand who I was, and then I also had struggled understanding who I was. So I think in the shock of it all, I may have erased some of the childhood memories I had in Singapore.
I think like because I moved to Canada when I was 15, and there's some years like in Indonesia that just it feels like something that I had in a dream. It's not, and I think the move itself can be like it's a weird trauma. Your brain is so occupied with catching up, fitting in, what's new around you, all this kind of thing, that everything, it's a survival thing, I think. And so you kind of like, all those old things, they just kind of get pushed aside because you have to make space for all this new stuff that's coming in.
Exactly
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
How was your experience when once you moved here? Did you find community? Do you find like other people that you would just hang out with every weekend, or were you kind of like you said with your accent, were you singled out a lot? Do you know what I mean? Like those kind of feelings.
Right. When we got here, we found sort of this like niche group of Singaporean Indians that also like had spent some time in Singapore and moved here.
So there's some commonality there.
There was
Yeah,
like
nice.
just a commonality and like comfort in that. And it was just sort of like a nice like access point into understanding Canadian culture. And then moving beyond that, like we expanded our social circle to include like other South Asian groups like Punjabis, Fijian community groups. You know, as things go, you just make more and more friends in different communities.
Now, kind of like in adulthood, are you having to like go back to establish some kind of identity for yourself? Or do you find like you're okay with just like I'm moving forward, this is who I am now? It like how much does the past influence your current identity?
Ooh, that's a really big question. I'm seeing a new world being formed where there's more interest in hybridity than like practice of like purity. And I think I am part of that world, and I am that change. I am like that example of this new culturally hybrid world, especially being Singaporean, right? Because like even in Singapore, that like hybridity already exists with like the three main
What,
cultural groups.
four national languages.
Yes, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, so even there, like, my mother, like, even though we're South Asian, like, she cooks Chinese food, she cooks Malay food, she cooks, like,
Awesome.
a fusion, like, you know, like, there was already a practice of hybridity in my home.
Yeah.
And then here, I'm more intentionally focusing on hybridity because I feel like there's a lot of value in exchange. Like, if we're able to create spaces where different cultural communities can exist, and then also share with each other things that are, you know, important to the communities. There's so much to learn from each other, especially in like how like we value like this like the idea of home, how we value land, all those things like I think tend to get lost through like just industrialization and capitalism. I think we can just sort of like remember like what's important and like share information about like how we think about the world and land. There's a lot to learn from. So I think now my focus is like, yes, so I'm Indian, I'm Singaporean, I'm Canadian, I'm all these things. But then I think that's not so important anymore. I think what's important is that I'm sharing what I know, and I'm open to learning more about other cultures.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So, okay, so you moved to Canada. Did you go to university or
I
college
did.
here?
Yes. I went to University of British Columbia, did my Bachelor's of Science degree there in psychology.
Cool.
And that's when I had taken a break from dance. Because I guess initially, like, I was a pre-med, and as during the course of my degree, I discovered that, like, medicine isn't really something I'm interested in. And also, like, volunteering in actual hospitals, I was like, this is just not something that brings me joy. And so, yeah, I had abandoned that, but like just really had a strong interest in psychology and learning and how it's related to environment and the body. So I continued with my studies and started working after graduation in research at another institution. And while I was working full time, I was like, okay, now I can, you know, pick up the things I love doing again, which was dance. And so I did that on the side. And slowly it just grew into this bigger thing. You know, I never really imagined doing it full time, but it just happened. It just happened that way.
Cool. So how do your parents feel about it, being Singaporean?
Yeah.
And you're not You're not a doctor. You're not.
Yeah, yeah, and
How does that
I
fly?
think the whole pre-med thing was a seed that like my parents planted,
Oh yeah,
you know.
I figured.
Yeah, and that's what their wish was for me. And so when I said I didn't want to be a doctor, and they, I guess like that took them a couple years to like just fully like fathom. And then slowly when I said, okay, now I'm going to switch careers, I'm actually going to stop working in research. I'm going to do dance full time. Like, actually what I got was silence. Like, they didn't want to say anything because I have really kind parents. Like, they didn't want
Okay.
to like discourage me in any way. But also I knew that I didn't fully approve, and I expected that.
Yeah.
But now it's been, I think, about 3 years since I made that decision, and they're super proud.
Yeah?
Yeah, I get a
Good.
lot of support from them.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you're fully supporting yourself through dance now.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes.
So that must help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
That and like little things like 2 months ago, I got flown out to Ottawa to meet Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, like to perform
right.
for him. And so then
Ain't no thing.
I had taken a picture with him and sent it to my parents, and they just like forwarded it to their like all their WhatsApp chats. Like they're just like so proud, even though like I didn't really feel like it was that big of a deal. But like every now and then I see like a glimmer of like happiness and pride and just sort of in what I've chosen to do. So.
When did you start learning dance?
I started learning at age 2.
2, okay.
Yeah, I know, super, super tiny. It's been in my life for so long.
Cool.
My family is really big on like the classical Indian arts. My grandfather was a musician,
Cool.
and he was born in Tanjore, in India, and it was just really important to him that that we were also musically trained, and my mom put me in dance as soon as I can walk, and it's just been in my life ever since.
Cool.
Right now, I'm working on this piece called Art of Time, and what it utilizes is this concept in Indian thought of time being cyclical, time being an entity, time being something that can be captured, and that you could place a boundary on it through repetitive embodiment of something.
Okay.
How these concepts have been used in like the practice of art in just the Indian subcontinent, and I'm interested in sharing these knowledges to like the wider public, so we can kind of like nuance like these conversations about physical science and just even like what time is, right?
And how is that communicated? Is that communicated through dance?
Through dance.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So right now, like my research involves minimalism. So I've moved away from like the very like strict vocabulary of Bharatanatyam, which is the form of classical Indian dance that I was trained in. And I'm interested in like everyday pedestrian movements and putting that into choreography to show this concept of cyclical time.
Okay.
So right now, like my interest is using what I know in these like old art forms, kind of unearthing or digging into it and finding what knowledge systems have been used in these art forms, and kind of putting it into a different context and format that can be accessible to people that are not in this like that are not familiar with like these like concepts of like Indian thought.
Okay. So, so you're kind of like, you're making it like you're trying to make it accessible to people who have never seen it before.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
trying to make it so that it's at first glance they kind of have an idea of what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah.
Is it just dance, or do you or do you sing as well, or like how is our music like? How is the music composed? Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's dance. I also sing. So I had like just come out of a research period. We're still developing music. Um, I'm really interested in natural sounds, like the sound of rain, just sort of like just sounds of everyday life, and it's still developing. It's kind of like I've been researching it for about 3 years, but yeah, it's still in its really early phases.
What does that mean, researching it? Like, how does that, like, say, tell me about a day of research. Like, what does that look like?
Um, it looks like kind of calling together a focus group and working them through these concepts. So, I mean, yes, we're taking everyday pedestrian movements, but there's sort of a method in like how we do that. Especially because in Bharatanatyam, there are ways that we hold our spine and pelvis that is intentional, that there's like certain energetic qualities that we're trying to embody. So teaching them that method takes quite a bit of time. And then we kind of research, like putting that together in pattern. And so that, yeah, the day looks like kind of getting everyone together, doing a warm up, going through the methodology, and then choreographing like a cyclical sequence.
Okay.
I mean, so the practice of Bharatanatyam is super, super old, you know, and I think I could reference it to a 6th century practice. At the time, it was called Sadir Atam. And yeah, it's really important to know that there was a hereditary dance family that was looking after this art form and carrying it through many centuries. And then during the British colonial rule, it was banned.
Yeah.
And then during its revival period by the high caste elites, what happened was the hereditary families taking care of this art form were ostracized and erased, even just like from, yeah, they were erased.
Okay.
So
It's intense.
it's so intense, and you know, it's come to me, it's come to my body through like just like wanting to learn and feel connected to India. You know, there's like, because like my family, my grandparents are from southern India, there was like this longing for me to feel connected to that place, you know, and I felt connection through sound, through music, through like these intricate rhythms that the drums played, through the outfits that I would wear, these like saris were intricately woven with silk that was like, that came from that land. And so through that, I felt really connected to my ancestry, and really like it was my access point to understanding Indian thought, and I found a lot of value in that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. That's cool. There's so many stories that aren't being told, and with the cycles of time, we're moving forward, looking back, moving forward, looking forward, moving forward. I don't fully understand it or my place in it, and that's why we talk about it. The cascade of evolution, triumph over adversity, the transformative power of art and story, and a young classical Indian dancer keeping an ancient art form alive. In Ashwini's words, She's a hybrid. She's straddling multiple worlds and yet still owning her place in each of them. She's shaking hands with world leaders. She's crushing it. And I think that highlights why this show is important. Do you have like a life philosophy that you follow?
A life philosophy. And nothing comes to mind right now. I mean, okay, yes, like say yes. I think for me, like that's what's been working so far. Like kind of to see opportunity and just like when it feels right to just say yes.
Just go for it.
Yeah, just go for it. And I think to be intuitive is so important. Feeling like you're like riding a wave, you know, to like recognize that there is a wave and like just ride it and enjoy it.
Cool. Do you feel like you're riding a pretty good wave right now?
I think so, yeah. I'm very lucky in that sense.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're out of the hot seat now.
Okay,
Don't worry
great.
about it. You can relax.